Christian parenting.
Mothers and sons have a unique and very important relationship. Join me and my special guest today on Family Vision.
Hi, my name is Millie Rienow. Welcome to Family Vision with my parents, Dr. Rob and Amy Rienow, strengthening families through practical, encouraging, and real conversations.
Hi, this is Amy Rienow with Visionary Family Ministries, and I am joined today by a special guest, our son, JD.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah, this is his first time in the studio, and we are going to be talking about mother-son relationships. And specifically, we're going to be talking about what it takes to build a strong mother-son relationship in those kind of treacherous, I can't even say that word.
Treacherous years.
Thank you. Thank you. Could you do that again? Because I still can't say it.
Treacherous years.
Yes, in the high school years, exactly. Teen years through college. So, JD, could you first just take a minute and introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, so JD Rienow, as you guys heard, I'm the third oldest in the Rienow clan. Through high school, I was homeschooled mostly, and then I went part-time to our local private school called Wheaton Academy. I was super active in sports, played baseball and basketball all throughout high school. Really was a huge part of my life, and that also led into college for me, and now I'm playing basketball at Olivet Nazarene University and also majoring in electrical engineering, and currently a sophomore there and just really, really enjoying my time.
That is a very good summary. I appreciate that. And I really appreciate you coming in today to be willing to have this conversation because, frankly, I talk to a lot of moms who are always asking me what my relationship was like with my high school boys. And I guess since you were my last high school boy, I kind of go to you. RW's a bit of a foggy memory right now because it seems like you were just there, although we're quickly moving into the college years. But I just wanted to start with asking you what you thought were some important ingredients for helping, specifically in our relationship, what helped to make that strong through those years.
Yeah. I think it all starts with a sense of mutual respect for one another. As I transitioned into high school, I started to gain a lot more independence for myself. And as I was gaining more independence, I was wanting to disconnect from both you and Dad and just kind of start pedaling the wheels for my own life. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's important for you and Dad to respect that in my life, but also it's important for me to continue respecting the role of parenthood and wisdom that you guys are feeding into my life. And there were definitely times I can remember in high school where I thought I knew better than you did in certain situations, which I might have in some instances.
I doubt that, but probably a few.
But there were definitely times that I could see myself losing sight of the respect that I needed to have for you in order for us to maintain that strong relationship. And I think it's important that transition starts to go both ways because high school really, it's like you can break it up. At least for me, it felt pretty broken up between freshman and sophomore year where I was kind of learning how to do this whole high school thing, and with sports at Wheaton Academy and that being new, and just kind of felt like I was going to you guys a little bit more for advice and things like that, and then transitioning to junior and senior year where I was very much like, all right, I'm good.
That's a good way to break it up, that even through those 4 years, there's a
lot
lot
changes in those 4 years. Yeah,
I agree, a lot changes. Let's talk specifically about communication, because as moms, that's probably one of the hardest things I think often with boys in particular. Now, this is sort of stereotypical, but often we get a lot more words from our daughters. And I know one thing that was a struggle for me was when I wasn't getting a lot of information from you. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I'm not always the biggest talker, which is ironic being on a podcast.
Yes, it is.
But
wait, let me stick my little story in here first, because we speak at family camps a lot. And one time I was at Gull Lake, and we were doing a question and answer, and a mom was asking me about this kind of issue. How do you talk to your high school son? And RW was actually in the audience. And I was doing that comparison between RW, my oldest. RW, his personality. He was never short for words. He was always telling me all that was going on. So when you came along and I was getting kind of nothing on a regular basis, it was quite a contrast. And I actually said up in front of everybody, I said, well, my second son is more nonverbal. And I didn't even realize I had said that, but I sat down and RW was like, you realize you just called JD nonverbal. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that was probably not the best description.
Yeah, I promise everything in my brain functions just fine.
Right. So, yeah. But that's how I was obviously feeling. Like I just wasn't getting a lot of words,
Yeah, which is fair because I didn't give a lot of words. I definitely was fairly reserved in my high school years. I definitely saved most of my words and more bubbly side for my friends, which I do somewhat regret in a sense. I think my freshman and sophomore year, I was still trying to figure out the whole high school thing. I didn't have a ton of super close friends at that time. And so I was more keen to communicate with you guys. But as I was really lucky in high school to have a super strong, really tight-knit friend group. And as that friend group grew closer and closer, I was pretty much pouring all of my communication into them and definitely felt myself kind of, I would say especially between my sophomore and junior year, kind of just not being as communicative with you guys. But I think communication is extremely important in the mother-teenage son relationship. It can be difficult at times, as I'm sure you know, on both ends, because not always did I want to communicate with you, and on your end, you always want to communicate with me, which is hard when you're receiving nothing.
Right, for sure.
There were my responses when I would get back from school would be, you'd say, how was school? I'd say, good.
Yeah, or even maybe just a grunt sometimes.
Right, not a lot to report.
Yeah.
And I think as sons, it's important for us to realize that sometimes our moms, they really need some more effective communication, and even just a little bit of communication can go a super long way more than we even can understand or fathom.
Right.
I think that honestly is just a big difference between boy and girl, honestly. It's just like oftentimes boys have, they're very task-oriented and let's just go one thing to the next, and we don't need to reminisce on what happened. But I think for moms, like, they want to be such an integral part of our lives, and they are such an integral part of our lives. And when we can let them in, it can provide a more complete and just healthier experience and lead into a better relationship in the future down the road.
Absolutely. And I actually like when you kind of wrote down a few notes, and you said you had to learn to both talk and to listen. And I really appreciate that, JD, because I think I saw that grow in you, like the talk. I used to say our conversation, I would come in and tell Dad, Ray, I said, JD and I had a great conversation. Well, that means I felt like he was listening to what I was saying. That was sort of how I defined great conversation.
Yeah.
But eventually, but let me just say that, though, JD, just to encourage you that even on those conversations where I felt like I was doing 90% of the talking, it did mean a lot. I could tell when I was getting through and when I wasn't getting through. And that does make a difference. But I would agree that you kind of learned the importance of joining in more, even though they probably still were like 75% me talking, and but still, that's okay.
You're just more talkative than I am.
Yeah, right. That has part to do with it. But I think it's so important that I would say it's important for moms to keep trying. I mean, would you agree with that? I just remember having to keep knocking on that door and keep trying. That's as far as communication goes.
No, yeah, for sure.
So the other thing that I struggled with during those years was how to keep this balance of, in many ways, just respecting the fact that you were a kid on a good path, making lots of good decisions, and I could see that. And I could also see, like, you were making good friends, and there was a lot of positive reinforcement, and I know that's not necessarily the case for all teenage boys, and we certainly had valleys that we went through. But it was hard for me as a mom to realize that there are areas at home that I had to call you, to task on, and that I had to correct. And it was kind of difficult because sometimes I felt like, I should go easy on him and maybe shouldn't address this. But I know that, that was something that was always like a difficult balance of like how to correct versus also to acknowledge that you were making a lot of good choices.
Well, you're definitely right that I was, in a sense, making good choices, but that doesn't mean that I wasn't doing stupid stuff and do Lord knows what on any given weekend. Stole a street sign and...
Yeah, making some maybe not so great decisions.
Not so ideal decisions.
Right, right.
But, I mean, to your point, I think it's important that you encourage your son to... You encourage and build him up. You also need to be disciplined and say, all right, well, although you're doing good at these, you still can't break into the Whitechapel at your school.
right.
Or something like that, which is less than ideal.
Yeah,
or
sort of Reno folklore.
Light things on fire while you're babysitting. Also,
right.
Also
that
bad.
was a bad one. I remember that too.
Things like that just have to be handled very sternly and directly, which I think you guys did a good job at. And then as far as just relating that to just simple at-home tasks, it's just a lot of times, I think for me, it felt like my reaction to whenever you would ask me, I mean, in high school, it was always take the trash out.
Yes.
That was the big thing, which in my mind, I was like, this is just ridiculous. I don't have time for this. Why can't Ray or Rush take the trash out?
Right.
But I think for me, understanding just for you and for Dad, it's a huge deal. And your daily lives, that's just a part of, it just eases your conscience. And when your conscience is eased, then my life goes better and the whole house is happier.
Right.
So
right.
I think for us, understanding that and knowing those chores/tasks that seem monotonous, we have to have like a good understanding or mutual understanding between moms and sons of where our priorities are, and on certain aspects those priorities have to line up.
Right. Because you don't, like you said, you thought someone else could be doing this, but for us, that was communicating honor and respect when you're willing to do those menial jobs. That says a lot. And it would always say a lot to me that you may not do it consistently, but I appreciated it every time you didn't push back when I asked you to do it. You know what I mean? That makes a huge difference.
Pushback does not get you anywhere.
No, you're absolutely right on that. And I just, as a mom, it just encouraged me that, to hold the line on those things, because I think it is easy for us as parents, especially those junior, senior year, just to
let the reins go.
Let the reins go and let you guys just not expect anything from you. And actually, in the long run, that doesn't really help you.
No, not at all.
I appreciate in your college apartment that you're the one doing a lot of the cleaning. Let's just acknowledge that.
I don't know about a lot. I do occasional cleaning.
Well, it's still...
I'm the type to let things pile up, and then I'll clean it all in one big sweep,
well,
which still aggravates my roommates, but it'll...
Yes, but I still feel like...
I clean.
Yes, you do clean. At least your roommates tell me that they appreciate that. Well, one thing I do want to quick talk about sports, since you were involved in sports so much. What were the things that I did as a mom that were helpful in that area, and what are things that sometimes moms or I did at times that were not helpful?
I think overall, looking back at sports as a whole and continuing to look at sports as I play in college, I think you've done a phenomenal job of encouraging and being supportive through all the sports that I've gone through and the different phases of sports it looks like, whether that's sitting on the bench or starting. It's either or. I think you've done a great job at supporting me, and specifically in high school, I remember you were heavily motivated to come to all of my basketball games, all my baseball games, especially the home games. Could have been just because you feel like you missed some out with our W, which I think was part of it. But either way, it was noticed and appreciated that you took the time, and I felt like there was a clear investment and interest in my life when I had family coming, even though the loud cheering in the stands could get a little like, oh gosh, they're here. But, but for the most part, it was just a good reassurance. But I think there's kind of two sides to the coin. Like, if you had been totally absent in my sports, never asked about it, never cared, then I would have been like, okay, well, maybe she doesn't want me to do this.
Yeah, right.
There's a disconnect there that I think would have caused a lot of angst and just kind of tension between me and you. And then on the flip side, if you were overly invested and after every game you're telling me, all right, you got to do this, you got to do this, come on, what's going on? Or always hosting a team dinner every weekend, then it's like, all right, well, she's way too involved, and that can also cause tension. And so I think there's just a strong balance of showing support, but also being able to give space in those like sporting events, whether that's having a tough loss and just kind of understanding, all right, well, most of the times I didn't want to talk about the games, whether they went good or bad. For the most part, I was just like, all right, the game is the game, and then I just want to move on. And so I think it's important. I could definitely tell there were some times in high school where you were like wanting to really go into the games and talk about them, and I just can't do it. And I think for moms, it's just all about finding that balance of showing support, but also not being overly attached to the
overly invested. I agree, and I think in our community, there's the tendency is probably more for the over-invested mom,
I would say so.
Where we are. And you're right that in other communities, it's probably more the detached one. Well, just circling back around now to that communication, one thing I want to take the opportunity to tell you, JD, that what I appreciated so much during your high school years is that whenever I had a birthday or Mother's Day, you took the time to write a very significant card, either saying what I meant to you or even just some encouraging words for me. And to be honest, JD, that got me through as a mom so much during those years that you took the time to write that down, because when I had those kind of, for lack of a better word, months or something where there weren't a lot of words, you know what I mean? Or I was trying to give you space, those cards meant a lot to me. I just want you to know how much I appreciate that, and just that to...
Well, I'm not a poet, but I did my best. That's about all I can say.
But I'm just saying it sounds like sometimes it might be easier for a teenage boy to write things down than to say them. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then one more thing, just to close out our time, that I think just made a big difference in the high school experience and developing our relationship, was just simply how I got to know your friends, or having kids over.
Yeah, well, as I kind of said before, I was blessed, specifically my junior and senior year, with just a really tight-knit group of friends. And I always felt comfortable and always wanted friends to come to our house. And I really hardly ever had to worry about you and Dad getting ticked off at me having friends over, or worrying about you guys not liking my friends and all these things. And it was just really appreciated. Obviously, I would ask more often than not whether a friend could come over or not, but I think you guys were, you in particular, because you're Miss Hospitality, but it was just really appreciative that more often than not, it would be like, yeah, of course you can have friends over. And also it was like, the house didn't have to be immaculate for me to have two of my buddies over and hang out. Like, there could, I would say the majority of the time, everything was a disaster. I mean, like...
Wait, you have to say it. That's right. Thank you. All right. Great.
My room in particular. My room was a disaster.
Yes. Your room and the basement for the most part, too. But
hey, that's where the boys live. Okay?
Right. But I so appreciate you saying that. First of all, I loved having your friends over. And I would say, yes, 90% of the time you asked, there were those occasional...
Yeah, there were occasional, like, all right, yeah, no.
They're just here. But I'll tell you, because of that, it helped me get over having things to be perfect, because my standards continued to decline. I mean, I became more and more comfortable.
You don't want to say your standards declined. People aren't going to want to come to our house.
Right. But I do. I loved having guys over, your friends over, and they would just crash there. And I think that helped. It actually was nice as a mom, because, like you said, sometimes the other side of your personality came out more with your friend, not personal, but you know what I mean?
No,
like just
absolutely.
all the laughter and the jokes, and it was fun to be a part of that. So,
and I promise if you come to our house, it won't be gross.
Well,
it'll be somewhat presentable, is a good way of putting it.
I'm not sure if that made things better. Okay, time to wrap up. JD, I so appreciate you coming in today. I hope this episode really encouraged moms out there, sons out there, just to keep working on it, right? That relationship, it's worth it.
Yeah, and it doesn't come without work, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
On both ends.
Well, as we wrap up this episode, I want to remind you about the Parent with Purpose online parenting conference coming up April 8th from our partners at Christian Parenting. There will be more than 40 speakers, all with great messages of encouragements for every age and stage of parenting. Rob will be sharing a message called Discipline That Shapes the Heart. So once you purchase your ticket, you can have access to all the videos for the rest of the year. All the information is at visionaryfam.com/purpose. That is visionaryfam.com/purpose. All right, well, special thanks for joining me and JD today on Family Vision.